Welcome back to another edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickle from Blue White Illustrated, and it's February, a recruiting dead period according to the NCAA, but it's hardly all quiet on the Penn State recruiting front. Plenty of good news to discuss on this week's show. We're going to get into a pair of commitments, one from a high school player, one from the transfer portal that Penn State has picked up over the last few days since we talked to you last Tuesday to kick off the month of February. We'll get into some RPM predictions from Ryan and some guys that could be making a similar choice as the two latest commitments for Penn State did sometime down the road. And we'll wrap things up with kind of an overview of what is ahead for Penn State during the rest of the month of February here. Ryan, we're sitting here on February 8th. Penn State had a very, I would say, successful run during the month of January when it came to getting visitors on campus. And that has led to a couple of big-time commitments. We'll start with the most recent one and dive into the transfer portal Penn State made for Hunter Nourzad. This was one that, unlike some past commitments we've talked about here, either via the portal or via the high school ranks or junior college, it was by no means a guarantee that Penn State was going to get him, even seemingly up to shortly before he announced that. But the Lions fended off Iowa, Illinois, Virginia Tech, Auburn, and those teams were in it to varying degrees in the end. But ultimately, Penn State gets a Cornell offensive lineman, 6'4", 298 pounds, is what the Big Red list him at, that has played a lot of football, mostly tackle, as you're going to see on the highlights that will pop up here if you're watching us on YouTube, at youtube.com/Blue White Illustrated. But he is expected to be a guard here. Ryan, how did this one play out ultimately in Penn State's favor?
It's a good question. We haven't been able to really interview him or anything like that, so I'd be lying if I said I knew Hunter's thoughts. I think Penn State won over Mom. That's kind of one thing that people have consistently mentioned is, Mom was really kind of in their favor. I think Eric Wilson had a little bit of a hand in it, just because Penn State was able to get in a former Harvard player, former Ivy League player, just like Hunter, and he was able to contribute throughout the season. That was the one thing that Hunter kind of mentioned to me earlier in the process. But I would just say that this was one that Penn State absolutely had to have. As soon as he got the offer, the one thing I consistently kind of heard from Penn State sources was just that this was the lineman that they felt most confident in, that they had a real chance in landing, and sure enough, they were able to do that. But it wasn't a guarantee. There was a lot of talk about Illinois. I wrote off Illinois throughout much of this process because of Iowa's history, Penn State's history, and what I was hearing. And that was a mistake because Illinois, I think, may have actually been second here over Iowa. And one thing that a few people mentioned to me was NIL. And I think that's something that, someone like myself, over the years, you can kind of just look at the top programs, right? And guys kind of lean towards those programs. And we never had to think about the financial impacts. And this was, Penn State won out in the end, but Illinois, I think they almost got him. Just, again, Hunter hasn't really opened up about that, but from talking to people, Penn State had to fight for this one. So it's a big addition, man. All-American at the FCS level. Pretty tough son of a gun. I think that's one thing that kind of stands out about his film, man. He gets after it, loves to finish blocks, and is physical in the run game. And, of course, that was something that Penn State absolutely needed to address. So they would love to add a tackle, of course, and he's going to be a guard, but that this was a player they really needed. Of course, he was the Ivy League Player of the Year for offensive line. What was the other stat? He allowed the fewest tackles for loss, or second in the Ivy League for tackles for loss. That's another great stat to add in there. And this is someone who's going to come in, and Penn State expects him to play. And that's one thing that, when the Spencer Rowland stuff kind of went down, after watching his film, I don't know if Penn State thought that Spencer Rowland could absolutely come in and contribute. And that is absolutely not the case with Hunter Nourzad. I mean, they are expecting him to come in and start, period. So we'll see what happens. He's got to get here in May. He's got to graduate first. Of course, anyone who goes to Cornell is going to get that degree before moving on, as he should. Now he has 2 years too. That's the other big thing here with that COVID year. He is a graduate transfer, but he will be able to play 2 for 2. It's not like a 2 for 1 kind of situation. He has used his red shirt. So big, massive. I mean, this is the biggest addition Penn State's had. I would put this above Mitchell Tinsley. And Mitchell Tinsley is a hell of a player. I think if you look at their careers, people would say, Mitchell Tinsley. But I think if you ask people in Lash, this was as important or more, and it's a big addition, no doubt.
Well, now we have to wait till after spring practice for him to get here, get acclimated with his teammates, get on the field. I'm sure there are at least a couple of folks out there, and it's a fair thought, thinking, well, we've heard this before, whether it's a junior college guy, whether it's a highly rated offensive lineman, whether it was Eric Wilson, who I think does not get enough credit for the way he played in 2021. But there's certainly been plenty of people who doubt at this point whether or not the latest seemingly savior, if you will, for Penn State's offensive line can do the job. And the tape says that he can, but it's obviously a jump from the FCS level, from Cornell to Penn State to the Big Ten. And there's going to be some tests early on if he would be a starter for Penn State, which, as you note, they expect him to be. So time will tell, but I don't think it was a mistake that Penn State really kind of, I don't want to say pushed all of his chips in here. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but there was just no doubt from what we could tell, even though he wasn't talking much, that Penn State felt like this was one, as you just said a moment ago, they had to have. And there's been recruits like that in the past that Penn State has not won that battle for, and they were able to do it this time around. So we'll see how it shakes out. But, this is one of the things we talked about when you sit there and you say, well, why? And to me, Ryan, it's not even as much to do with, will he be a starter? Will he not be a starter? Blah, blah, blah. That'll be debated throughout June, July, August, whatever. And some people will point to Eric Wilson and say good things. Some will say bad things. Some will point to Anthony Wiggin, even though it's not comparable, and say this or that. Yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a veteran guy. And there's not, first and foremost, I mean, when you look across this offensive line, it's going to be young in 2022 in terms of actual playing time. And this guy played at a high level at the FCS level, and there's no reason to think he cannot do that at the FBS level. So we'll see, but there's certainly a reason why Penn State pushed so hard to make this one a reality.
Yeah. Yeah, huge get, man. I don't have a whole lot more to add aside from what we've already said. I think I just from talking to people, man, like when this offer went out, and I originally called to just ask if it was legit, and of course it was, but man, they just were immediately high on him from the start. I think when you compare him to Eric Wilson was more kind of a, he's not a brute strength kind of guy, more technically savvy, where Nourzad just, he gets after it. He's a tough son of a bitch. Sorry for my language, but that's kind of the best way I could put it. So, I'll be very curious. You're right. I mean, there's been a lot of guys come in and haven't really lived up to fans' expectations, and we'll see where this goes. The other thing I would add is that, like you mentioned, putting all your chips into this. Well, like there aren't other places to put your chips,
right.
Or at least Penn State didn't feel that way. I mean, there were other guys, but for one reason or another, this is the one that Penn State, evaluated and did the research on, and this is where they're putting them. I mean, I know Tyler Steen and some of those Virginia linemen, and they recruited them a little bit, but man, as soon as this one hit the portal, within I don't know if it was an hour or a couple of days. No, it was definitely a couple of days. That's right. I'm thinking of somebody else, but it was like, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days after he hit, they were all in, and that was the consistent theme throughout December and January, was that this is the guy at the top of our board. This is the guy we absolutely have to land. We'll pursue others, but everybody, this was a total group effort. So big get for Penn State, man, and they need him to come in and contribute as soon as he gets here in the summer.
We had some discussion about it on the Lions Den forum before we move on to the latest high school commit, but fair at this point to assume Penn State will probably be quiet in the portal, barring some kind of a mid-semester surprise, until after spring practice, and as we get closer to the end of the spring semester across the country, when guys will again be going into the portal to look for new homes ahead of the 2022 season.
Well, they definitely want Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, the North Texas linebacker.
And so does everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, he's up to like 8 or 9 offers now. We'll see kind of how it plays out. The one thing I will say is that Penn State seems to feel pretty good about the conversations they're having with those guys, and that's not something I've consistently heard with others. I'll generally just put it bluntly, and I'll ask, you guys getting good vibes from these guys or not? And a lot of them they'll be honest back and say no at times. So when I do hear that, they're consistently speaking with guys and, having good conversations with with high school coaches or parents or whomever it may be, that does perk me up and grab my attention. So we'll see. I haven't talked to Grace. I haven't talked to Gabriel. It's really hard to talk about the portal, man, because at least of these high school guys, I'm talking to their parents, their coaches, the players, and I actually know what they're thinking. And I don't try to come on here and BS and pretend I know sometimes. And with Gabriel and Grayson, I've never talked to them. I don't have a lot of communication. All I do is just get one-way opinions from people I trust and lash. And right now they feel like they're having good conversations. So we'll see where that leads to. It's a dead period right now. I think we talked about this on the last podcast. They can't visit during the dead period. That was the only extended period they have there is that week before classes start when it's a dead period still in January. That's the only grace period, I guess, the transfers get over normal recruits. So there will be no visits this month, but be sure we'll be watching them closely in March. I would think that it's possible if the Murphys wanted to commit before spring ball, but it'll definitely be another surge of players entering the portal after in late April, early May, and I would think that would be the next run that we see.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the Murphy twins could certainly decide sooner than the chance when they can take visits again in March, but it would seem more likely that they would wait it out and take trips. Again, we haven't talked to them yet, but just from what we've seen so many other players do rather, most of them do like to take trips. It's not always a guarantee, but there's a fair number of them who do. So time will tell.
And Tyler Steen's brother got an offer from Virginia too. He ended up signing with Virginia, so you would think that that's kind of where Tyler's leaning, the Vanderbilt offensive lineman. But we'll see what happens.
It's the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickle. We're moving along from the transfer portal commitment that Penn State picked up along the offensive line to the latest high school one. It's Jven Williams, a player you've heard Ryan talk about quite a bit, another standout Pennsylvania prospect in the class of 2023. He pops for Penn State on Saturday. I don't know where you were at that point, Ryan, but when I saw the James Franklin bat signal came out, I think I talked about this with T. Frank yesterday, that was not the direction I thought we'd be going here. I wasn't sure what direction they were going at that very second in time, but if you would have been able to freeze that moment, I'm not sure I had picked up on the tea leaves of Jven Williams being close to ending his recruitment, but Penn State gets another extremely talented guy, and I mean, for Phil Trautwein, for Mike Yursich, for James Franklin, they are pushing at a rapid pace to add offensive linemen to this program, and this is the latest one.
Yeah, I was close to putting in a pick. I mean, I'll be honest, Sean Fitz is our competitor, but Sean's a good friend of mine, and we were both literally talking about putting in picks like 2 days before that he committed. I think it was like Thursday. We were texting about that, and so I was close. I think Sean was close too on that. We were laughing then Saturday when that all went down. So not that we necessarily were expecting him to commit right away, but we knew he was firmly leaning towards Penn State, and that's kind of that was easy. Everybody behind the scenes was hinting towards that. So big pickup, another guy, man, who with Jven, man, I think it's all physical potential. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, he shows sign of good technique and whatnot. But he has, I think, a lot to continue to improve on. But it's just like all these high school guys. I feel like I say that all the time with high school guys, and it's just a truth. Except for Alex Birchmeyer, I think he's a little more established technically and from a leverage perspective, things like that. But it's all about Jven's. To me, man, it's all about those track and field numbers with him. I mean, that's what really just kind of grabs my attention. I think what was he, the third or what I forget. Damn it, I forget what he finished last year at the track and field. It was bronze. Yeah, bronze in the shot put. 59 3-inch shot put, 176 2-inch, 176 feet 2-inch discus. And that just shows that core strength. And that's kind of where I'm getting at with this. That lower body and the core strength is something that is really coveted. I know from talking to sources again, where that was, when that offer went out, it was the first thing someone mentioned to me was just that those track and field numbers really grabbed their attention. He came to a camp then and didn't have a great day, if I'm being honest. And Jven admitted that, and Penn State sources kind of said the same thing. I wouldn't say Penn State was as down on him. They were just kind of, I think, expecting more from a technical perspective. But they really saw his film go to a different level this year, especially with his physicality and improved. I think with some of his different blocks, pulling, reaching, things like that. At least from what I was told. And that's kind of what got the offer in September. And Jven even admitted that he was seriously considering commitment right after that Villanova game, which I'm happy he didn't that day because I was down watching Deny. That would have fell on your lap there,
I was
Greg.
ready for it. Should I had to have been called into action, but yeah, we appreciate the off season.
That's why we hired you
for sure. Yeah.
I was actually, for the record, I was on my way to Wegmans. I literally got in my car and I was leaving the neighborhood, and I didn't even get out of my neighborhood yet, so it was funny timing, and I just walked home. My wife was like, "Are you kidding me right now? We get your kids ready. You're all finally after a half hour getting everything ready." I just walked home. I was like, "You don't even have to turn around. I'll do the walk of shame here to go work." So, yeah, but it was good, man. I was happy that he got that over with because I knew he was leaning that way, and one thing he made clear throughout the process was that he wanted to keep it quiet and keep it a surprise, and he did a great job of that. So, props to Jven. He trains with Garage Strength, of course. That's the same place Nick Singleton trains. Joey Schlaffer, I believe, a couple other guys from Reading. They do a great job up there, and I'm probably gonna make a trip up there at some point to go check out a workout. I'm definitely going to go see Jven throw. I'm hoping that he can make it, at least like districts or to the track and field meet of champions kind of thing. Love to go see him throw.
Lots of good memories in Shippensburg, buddy. Lots of recruiting interviews done in Shippensburg at the state track and field championship. So that'd be a fun one to add to the list. We'll see. What do you make of just Penn State's run here along the offensive line? I mean, it's not just the two guys we've mentioned. There's been others. This class is in a pretty good place with offensive linemen. You mentioned Vega Ioane, who's a late addition at the end of the class of 2022. Is it just the way the chips have kind of fallen here? Is it just the kind of the luck of the draw of late? Or is this a concerted push that has paid off in a way maybe more emphatic or noticeable is probably a better word than, is it just a situation where things are happening and they're happening all at once for Penn State and it's just the way it is? Or is this a culmination of something else in your mind?
No, I do think Jven was impacted by Donko. I like Cooper Cousins, Vega Ioane, put them to the side, right? They're two different classes. They don't, they just kind of, Ioane was NSD, and of course, Cousins committed before then. He just wanted to wrap it up. So they don't, that's just kind of more coincidental. I think Cousins just kind of wanted to commit around that time. But Donko commits, right? You got 3 offensive linemen now in this class. And from what I've gathered, Penn State's been kind of consistently saying, throughout into the summer and into the fall and into now, I think 4 to 5 was kind of the number they were tossing around to a lot of these guys. And for the record, I think it's going to be 6 now because there's just too much talent out there. If they can make 6 happen, they will. But
is this one of those cases? Let me just stop you real quick because we've seen them strike when the iron's hot at other positions, namely receiver. But there's been some other ones in the secondary, perhaps, where they will take more than what we expected because the talent is there, the numbers are there, and you can't always guarantee it's going to happen that way in the next cycle. So is that this or is it something else?
Yeah, but it's the similarities between those previous years and this is that it's early enough in the class that you can do that.
Right.
If we're in a situation where we're at 18, 19 commitments, it doesn't work that way. So yeah, whenever, especially when it's an important position in need, if you have a kind of a run like that in February, March, April, even into the summer, you can make that happen. But once the class gets 70% full, it doesn't really work that way anymore. But this was an important position in need too, so it's really fallen perfectly for Penn State, right? You're getting a lot of quality guys on board. It's a very important position. I think the other thing is, it's great for Phil Trautwein. He was under some heat this year, and I've said it a million times. I felt like blame was put more on Trautwein than it probably should have been for results this year, and some up and down recruiting success. And so I think this is a great run for him. I'm happy for that guy, man, because I felt like he was really kind of what's the right word? Just kind of slept on. That's not the right word. I just think he has a lot of potential, put it that way. So, obviously the offensive line has to right the ship this year, or it may not matter. But this was a good run, and he's definitely a good recruiter. I have no doubts about that because of the way kids, and maybe more importantly, the way parents talk about him. So, big addition there in Javens, man. That was only kind of a matter of time. And to get back to your original point, when Donko gets on board, you've been putting into their ears forever now, 4 or 5 commitments. You see 3 there in your Javen, and you want to go to Penn State. You just don't have a firm timeline. Screw it. Why not just end it now? And I think that was a big reason there. So it'll be interesting now to see what happens with Evan Link and Samson Okolola and some of those guys. Luke Montgomery is going to commit next week. I would expect him to end up at Ohio State. I put an RPM prediction in for Luke yesterday, actually. So I don't see that one happening. I think it's all about Evan Link, as I've said a million times. And then Samson Okolola gives me the vibes that he'll be somebody that waits a little while, and he's a guy that you'll absolutely find a spot for.
It's the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. Ryan, let's move on. We're a little bit more than halfway through this week's episode 2. You just mentioned an RPM prediction. You put 2 in over the weekend for a pair of prospects that Penn State has really spent a lot of time pushing for on the defensive side of the ball in this class. Each had a chance now to maybe get to know Manny Diaz a little bit more than they did prior to him coming to Penn State. But let's cover those quickly. 2 guys who Penn State fans should know well, certainly listeners of this podcast or viewers of this show on YouTube and or readers at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com and On3 have heard of these guys. Why did you choose those 2 players to log your latest picks?
Well, we get Jven Williams commits right, early in the afternoon. And I'm just talking to people, we get our stories up, and I have a few conversations with, sources, people up in Lash, and, we just get into the topic of, who could be next kind of situation. And, these were 2 guys that, I don't know if they're going to commit soon necessarily, but I think they're firmly leaning towards Penn State. And that's the 2 linebacker prospects, Tamir Robinson out of Pittsburgh and Tony Rojas out of Fairfax, Virginia. Tony's been here, I believe, 4 times now since the summer. Tamir's been here, I think, 5 times now if you go back to when he visited as a freshman. So there's a lot of things there that make the most sense. With Rojas, I think Rojas is their number 1 linebacker target now. I really do. I used to have that securely under the Tamir Robinson, and it was number 1, and then everybody else kind of 1A. With the injury, I guess maybe the best way to put it is, as I've learned more, I think Rojas and Tamir were kind of always pretty close, neck to neck, and then because of that injury with Tamir, it kind of bumps Rojas up a little bit more. At least in my mind, it does. That may not be the case for Penn State, but I'm kind of calling Tony Rojas their number 1 linebacker target now. And man, I can think you can almost make a case that he's not their number 1 maybe player in the overall class, but people speak incredibly highly of everything about Tony Rojas that I think he's absolutely top 3 or so. And I don't really know, this is kind of going off topic a little bit, but I don't really know who would be the true number 1 prospect in this class. I think Nicholas Harbor people would point to, but he's kind of still he's just a freak athlete more than an awesome football player. I think you could argue maybe Jason Moore, but it's just hard to figure that out. But anyway, to get back on topic here, I think these are both guys who could realistically end their recruitments in the spring, and that's kind of where I landed on. And when you see, this is another position where you'll probably see 3 commitments this year. If both are trajecting towards the spring, one hops on board, wouldn't surprise me if somebody were to follow quickly. So I logged Tamir. Saturday at 5:30. It was just after a conversation I had with sources. And Rojas was at the same time. It was 5:29 and 5:34 on Saturday, and just after a couple conversations. So we will see what happens with that. I think I could see both still taking more visits to other schools. Tony Rojas had a good visit to North Carolina, and I believe Virginia Tech was the other one. And Tamir Robinson should make it back out to Notre Dame, but man, I just think everything's pointing in Penn State's direction with Tamir. And maybe the most important thing, last topic here, is just Penn State hasn't wavered at all since Tamir's injury. I'm talking about Rojas maybe moving up, but I'm not trying to come off as if Penn State's not as high on him, because they're still just as high on Tamir Robinson as they've always been. He's incredibly important prospect in Pennsylvania. I actually think that Penn State would have Tamir Robinson above Jven Williams in their PA rankings, although On3 has Jven above Tamir. But I'm just trying to make it clear how important he is to them. So the fact that they've been consistent throughout, they've been very supportive of his recovery and all that stuff, where, some other schools may have kind of backed off a little bit, or at least just slowed down to see how things progress. I think that's only going to help Penn State with him.
Well, we'll see how things play out, but 2 high-priority targets for the Nittany Lions at a position where restocking the cupboard is not the worst idea in the world. Penn State fans so desperately want news about linebackers from the transfer portal. If we had it, we'd share it with you. First Inside the Lions Den premium forum, which you can sign up for just $1 for 1 year of access, but also here on the show if we had it to share. And we talked about the Murphy twins earlier, and one of them could be a linebacker, maybe both. We'll see. But obviously Penn State would have to land them before that happens. And then, I think what's hard, and I'm going to take this on a little bit of a tangent, but I'll tie it all back together, I promise, is that the transfer portal, you see schools having a bunch of success. USC, obviously, the one that's received the most praise and the most adulation, I guess, for what it's done in the transfer portal, led by Caleb Williams, a quarterback. But, there's only so many schools that can have the kind of success where they really change the outlook of their team based on what they do in the portal. Penn State was one of them last year. No questions asked.
Mm-hmm.
Arnold Ebiketie, Derek Tangelo, some others. I mean, they changed the outlook of their season in some ways. I know it was 7-6, but it could have been worse without some of these guys. Eric Wilson, could go on and so on and so forth. So, just because other schools are adding players at will in the portal does not – it just, number one, not everyone's going to be able to do it. But number two, it's not guaranteed to work out. I think I heard Lincoln Riley on a talk show, Ryan, say they still have like 30-some roster spots open or something crazy like that. I mean, so they are going to have a different level of need, and that's a different what's the word I'm looking for here? Level of what they will take. Yeah. A level of what they will take compared to a place like Penn State, who is going to wait until it makes sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And at linebacker, there's just not a lot of good options that have even gone in there. And so you're talking about a lot of schools fighting for a very limited number of guys who can actually play at this level in the portal at this point. We'll see if it changes. But, the other thing I would say is that as you point toward getting guys at the end of spring practice, well, why do we know that guys leave schools? Because they don't think they're going to play at their school in all likelihood after what they went through in spring practice. So do you really want those guys to come join you at Penn State if they can't play at the school they're currently at? So I know it's easy to get excited about what's possibly going to be out there, but, when you're talking about linebacker, your best shot at this point for 23 and beyond is going to come through that high school class, and maybe you get lucky and you add one prior to the 2022 season, but it's a lot easier said than done.
Look at all of Penn State's addition in the portal the last 2 years. Ebiketie had a lot of success at Temple. Nourzad, of course, 20-plus consecutive starts. Tangelo, 2+ year starter at Duke. Who am I missing? Mitchell Tinsley, had a lot of success at Western Kentucky. Like, they're not taking young guys who are coming up. They're taking proven guys usually at a lower level than what Penn State is. And that's clearly their formula here. And now, you have the Murphy twins who they're still young, but, they came in and contributed right away at North Texas. So, I think if you look at the numbers at a lot of other schools, like they're taking guys who were like highly coveted out of high school, but who haven't done anything at the college level. And I think Penn State's shown enough now to let me know that that's not going to be their plan. Even if there is a kid who, they liked a good bit, coming out of high school and for whatever reason hasn't done much at his previous school. Like, there's been multiple examples of that, and they haven't pursued that, that type of portal entry, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be, they're going to be looking for high quality FCS guys, group of 5 players who have consistently contributed and are looking to move up the ladder. So, fans who, think, oh, this player was a, Rivals, when I say Rivals 250, I spent 10 years at Rivals, sorry. If this guy was a, on 300, 4-star player, and Penn State was interested in him 2 years ago, why aren't they going after him again? Well, I'm sure they have information that, he wasn't very good in practice or, got pushed around on the scout team, whatever it may have been. So just keep that in mind.
Fair to say at this point, the only linebacker target they really went for and lost out on in the portals, a kid from UNLV that ended up at Michigan State, whose name eludes me at the moment.
Yeah,
I couldn't even tell you how long or how hard they pressed for him, but I just remember that name coming up during the earlier part of the offseason.
Ricky White? No, Jacoby Windman.
Yes, that's it. That is it.
Jacoby
Good,
Woodman. Yeah.
good pull.
Yeah.
So
we'll
see.
I looked like you were typing something on your computer. So that's what I was like,
you beat me to it. You beat me to it. All right, we're coming down the home stretch here on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. Ryan, as we've talked for the last half hour, there is a dead period in place, but there's still plenty going on. Anything in particular fans should be watching for at this point? Winter workouts are underway with the current team. You have guys still getting offers, from Penn State, even though it's the dead period, they can still communicate electronically. Is that the main thing to watch for at this point?
Yeah, for the most part. The reason the dead period was put into place, I've had this talk, I think, a few times on this or T-Frank, was to focus on your team in February. Because in previous years, coaches were upset at the fact that, especially when the early signing period was introduced and before, actually, I think the early signing period was introduced when February started. But my point is, like, the first, 60% of my career, there was no February dead period, right? But there was no time to focus on your team. Every weekend you had recruiting visits coming up. And,
right.
Because of that, then you got to set these visits up during the week. And it just took so much of their time that coaches felt like they didn't have enough time to either look back on the previous season or get ready for spring practice, whatever it may have been. So this dead period was put into place as a 28-day period for coaches to say, hey, look, I'm going to recruit you at night. We're going to text. We're going to communicate. But during the day, I need to focus on the guys who are here. And that's, it's funny, man, but I talk to coaches all the time and support staff who just kind of complain that, when players get here, they don't get nearly as much attention as they really deserve outside of the season. So that's really a main reason why that was put into place. But yeah, to answer your question, I think, obviously looking for new offers to go out. And then guys who are setting up March visits. I think that'll be kind of, especially as we get into the second half of February, you'll see a lot of guys setting up, pretty much every weekend in March for the most part. And for Penn State, especially once spring practice gets going in the second half of March is when you'll see a heavier amount of visits, I would think. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have a junior day, one of those first 2 weekends in March. That we've seen that in the past. So, for example, today I wrote a story on Justin Benton. He's a really good defensive tackle prospect out of Georgia that I think fans need to be paying attention to more. And he's talking about coming back up here in March. He was here in June, and he's someone that I think Penn State probably is top 3 with right now. So just watching for those visits coming up. That's the big thing. But going to have a slow couple weekends, man. I'm really actually I would say that, but then we get Jven Williams committing on Saturday and changes up my plans. No Home Depot trips, I guess, but. Oh, well. There's worst thing in the world. All right. This has been the latest edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickle. We'll be back next week with more on the Nittany Lions search for the next stars and commitments, either via the transfer portal and the high school ranks. But for now, you can find us at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Remember, it's $1 for 1 year of access to all the inside Penn State football and athletics news and notes you need to know. He's Ryan Snyder. I'm Greg Pickle, and we'll catch you next week on the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast.